everybody, and welcome to Mindset Michelle TV. And this week, my wonderful, fabulous guest is Nicole Harlow. Hello, Nicole.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's so wonderful to have you here. And Nicole is an amazing, amazing, lovely lady who has so many stories that she'll be sharing with us today. And she's got a very interesting background as a career coach, as a headhunter, and also having worked all over the world. So we're going to have so many wonderful things to share. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself, Nicole?
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And I think when I was preparing for today, thinking about where I came how I came to get to this point of where I am right now. And you're right, I'm a career coach, a recruiter, and a headhunter, which I love, but I've had lots of different milestones that I think have contributed to getting me here to where I am. So I won't go back all the way because I'll show my age a little bit then. But I think about, what I've done for work. And my big thing is loving what you work. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I've loved pretty much everything that I've done in my life, and it's been really varied. I first started working way ages ago, 90s, and I was in a super corporate environment, and I loved it for the shoulder pads and the big hair. And look at that, it's all back in fashion again now, so I'm really happy about that. But it sort of cemented in me that need to be working with others and being in those big, busy, noisy environments, and it was great. And then I actually went overseas and spent 10 years overseas. And I loved it. I'll say that a lot today. You'll hear me say I loved it a lot. I actually went over there as a horrendous term called a trailing spouse, and was there to raise a family. And a couple of years into that, I found myself as a single parent and needing to work and wanting to find something of my own thing, and had a number of different careers over there, everything from managing a big expatriate organisation, running events, kids sporting activities and that sort of thing, to I ended up being a real estate agent there for a number of years, which was my favourite job over there, working with people. And it helped me cement that joy of helping people. And when I came back to Australia, we'd sort of tossed a coin and decided where we were going to live. My husband's from the Netherlands and I'm originally from Sydney. Sydney won. I got outvoted by everybody. Sydney won, and I came back here, thought I'm going to be a real estate agent in Sydney, and then went for an interview with 2 recruiters and thought I'm going to be a recruiter. Fell in love with what they did, and so I've been doing recruiting ever since I came back, and like I said, I love it.
Wow, Nicole, thank you so much for giving everybody that much better understanding about who you are and the incredible journey that you've been on. I mean, a trailing spouse and
recruiter. It's a terrible name for it, isn't it?
I love these unusual terms that you come across. It's like something that doesn't quite come off the tongue very well, and I think that should sort of say, how awkward the actual meaning is, as well as
It's so true. It's a fun job to have, though. There's a lot of tennis.
Tennis, yeah. So talking about tennis, what do you think that success means to you with all of those different types of roles that you've had and different types of work? I hear you, yes, talking about working with people, but what does success mean to you then?
It's a really good question, isn't it? To me, it's not money orientated, even though I am, I'm a salesperson really by trade. I am motivated by commercial activities and big wins and things like that. I think most people are. But for me, it's happiness. And I know that sounds really corny, but if I'm happy and the people around me are happy and I'm doing a good job, I find that is really defining what success is for me. I have to love what I do. If I don't love it, I'm not doing it. And that's probably my age. The story, I had a really big health journey, and that's contributed to my mindset as well. My life is too short. If I'm not loving it, I'm not doing it. It's lucky that I love what I do. But that success to me is that happiness, and I push it and I drive it for everybody in my life too. I've got adult children who have just started working themselves, and I say to both of them, do something that you love. For goodness sake, get out there and earn some money and have a good career, but make sure you love it from the get-go as much as you can.
And I hear that exuberance when you're talking, and I feel it when you're presenting as well. Doing what you love, and so success then, from what I'm hearing, is very much about being aligned and doing what you love, and then you love what you do. But
So
obviously that's a little bit of a difficult thing for some people to find. What is it that they love? So what is it about your mindsets for success that you think has helped you to work out what it is you love?
Yeah, I think it's about thinking. I always say to people, if you think about what is your big sky thinking about what you want to do in life. I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I grew up, right? And it's lucky for my co-host my co-chair, whatever you call it, co-pilot, that I didn't, because I'm terrible at maths and I would have been a terrible fighter pilot. But I think of things I just love the idea of it. And I think if you think about things that you love to do and how can you align that from a career perspective, how can you back it off a little bit and think, okay, I'm not going to be a fighter pilot, but maybe I go and join the Defence Forces then, or I'm not going to be an Academy award-winning actress, but maybe I work in movies or TV, or I want to be a star footballer. Maybe I work in an NRL club or a football club or a soccer club, whatever you want to do. So I think it's important that you love it and that you have the confidence even to think about what are the opportunities that are out there for me. Think big picture and then just back it off a little bit.
Very, very much so. I remember one of the great courses I did many years ago, and they talked about the experience versus like the object. So, and it's pretty relevant for today. So obviously people can't go and have the big experience of like an overseas European holiday or this or that. But what was the feeling and what was it that they were aiming for with that big overseas European holiday? And when you start to drill down into something like that, you can actually see, well, the experience was something new, meeting new people, adventure, et cetera, and so that object that they thought, oh, you know, I can't have that if I don't have the overseas experience, they can still have that experience, but locally and in different ways. And I hear that very much with what you're sharing and that whole mindset around, if I can't be a fighter pilot and I don't want to subject my my trailing significant other to you being a fighter pilot, how can you have those similar types of experiences in your life and create that mindset so you're succeeding and you're having the experiences that you want, even if the outer version of it is different to what you originally planned or thought. And that nicely leads on to, so what would be the 3 main tips that you would give people then if you're saying to people, well, if you don't quite know how to find that joy and you don't quite know what that career is, what 3 main tips might you give for people in that position?
Well, not be afraid of what it could be. I think that's the important thing, to be really honest with yourself about what you like to do, how viable is it really out there, but not be afraid to go after it either, and the success that could possibly come with it. I think that's really important, and not to be embarrassed about it, right? Like, it is, things are possible, and I think that maybe that's what 2020 has taken the edge off a little bit, but things really are still possible for everybody. And I think that, you know, it's having that open-mindedness. I'm an incredibly open-minded person. I'm up for most things. I'm a little bit of a nervous person. I'm scared of skiing and things like that. I don't want to fall off a mountain, but I'm open-minded to every different opportunity that presents itself to me. I would try anything. So I think it's being open-minded about that, and it's being yourself. I think it's, again, another thing that 2020 showed us is that we show up to work nowadays. It's, you know, sitting in our lounge room often, so people have seen so many different aspects of ourselves. So I think trying to find what is it that you want to do and be, and that you can bring your whole self to that. I think I do that at work and in play, actually. You know, in all aspects of my life, I bring my honest, natural self to it, and I think that's really important as well. So that would be my 3 key things.
Yeah, I think always bringing your best self to whatever it is that you're doing is really such an important part of life, whatever role or whatever job that you're in. And I know for myself that in some of the more challenging work environments, if you like, where I've had to really step back and look at, well, this is about me and my behaviour. I actually wrote a book a few years ago about mindful leadership, and I share in that one of the stories around, I worked for Reuters. It was a wonderful opportunity, and I worked for Reuters in the UK. And I was helping set up this farewell party for one of the, I don't know, he was head of something or other, head of, you know, global something. And there was all of this kind of very messy stuff that happened around paying for it, because it was quite an expensive farewell. And the gentleman concerned kept saying, no, 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 I'm not going to pay. I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to pay for it. And he really kept telling everybody he was paying for it. And in the end, his associate ended up paying for it through the company. And I just kind of asked a couple of questions around it and went, oh, this doesn't sound quite right, because it's, again, not ethical. They're kind of putting it through an expense accounts, etc. And it wouldn't have mattered, but if he was telling everybody he'd paid for it and he hadn't paid for it. And in the end, the role I was in, I ended up leaving because it just got quite uncomfortable with the fact that it didn't match my values. It didn't match my integrity. It didn't matter if it was $1, or in that case, it probably would have been about £30,000 or something ridiculous. But it was that whole sense that they were pretending, and it didn't matter if he paid for it or he didn't pay for it, but that pretending that he was going to pay for it just really didn't sit well for me. And so it was an interesting time, you know, obviously being overseas and being younger. It was quite a, you know, do I really say something? And, you know, who am I to say something? I'm a nobody in the scheme of things. I wasn't global head of anything. But for me, it was really important to be true. And I think it's so important as you're building your career at whatever stage you're at, to always keep thinking about, you know, when I look in the mirror in the morning or when I go to bed at night, is my conscience clear and am I okay about it? And then, interestingly, having done that when I was younger, and there's been times now where I've kind of walked away from things and stood up for things, but you learn more that discernment about what becomes more important to you and what brings you joy and what actually creates environments or situations which aren't very joyful. And I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Oh, 100%. And so much of what you said there I really resonated with. And I was actually talking about this at work the other day. And one of my favourite sayings is, an honest man or woman needs no memory. And I think that is how I try and behave. And it's not always easy, and especially in recruitment. I have to tell some people some really hard things sometimes, and I hate letting people down. It's probably one of the hardest things. I want people to be happy, and I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, and often I have to be. But I think if I can be honest and transparent and constructive in what I'm telling people, then I'm okay. You know, I can get home and sleep at night. I absolutely detest lying or dishonesty of any way, shape or form. You know, my husband can tell me that I look great every day. He can lie about that. But I just think that it's, yeah, that's right. It's always true. You know, you just be yourself and be authentic, and don't be ashamed or embarrassed about that. And if it's not aligning with where you are from a career, a job perspective or a company perspective, then don't be ashamed of that and don't be afraid of that.
And I think that this is a really good point to raise as well about the type of work that you do, because you're such a joyful, happy person, yet you work in an industry when you're doing your recruitment, which actually is really quite tough on the people. You know, we've been very lucky here in Australia, but there is still structural unemployment, ageism, all of those different factors at work. And you know, even being honest with somebody and saying, well, look, you know, you weren't a cultural fit, but it might have been because they were all, you know, one-legged hippos or something like that. I don't know. But, you know, obviously having to be appropriate about that type of feedback, but helping the person to understand that, well, yeah, this is the reality of those types of environments. And I think, again, something a bit more topical at the moment is obviously everything that's happening within the culture of the Australian Federal Parliament and the way that women are being treated there, and the focus now on people like Scott Morrison to be role models, and you know, what he says and does and how he says and what he does and acts is then setting the standard for what other large organisations. But you have Channel 7, there was scandals, you have so many scandals out there. It's just kind of like, when will this end? When will it be not just written on a piece of paper that women can be safe and treated equally and paid equally in the workforce? But you must, in your work, be dealing with these kinds of angst and anxieties that not just women, but men and ethnically and diverse cultures and LGBTIQs and all of those things. You must be dealing with this day in and day out.
Yeah. It does come up a lot. And, you know, I always think that, you know, I'm lucky in that I'm just female, but I'm still, you know, educated, certain race and certain demographic. But it's still really rife. I'm a huge fan of diversity and inclusion, and you know, as long as we have to keep talking about equality, then it's still a problem. When we're no longer having to talk about it, then it's obviously no longer an issue. But I think that we still need to be doing a lot. I think people need to be vocal about it. People need to be standing up. Whoever you are, if you're seeing something that's not right, you need to be vocal about it. But I think you even need to be a real advocate for something. It doesn't have to, you don't have to see something going wrong to say this is not okay. I'm a huge I guess, vocal person about some of the stuff that's going on in rugby league at the moment. And I've got a young son, he's 19, and I think of some of the leadership qualities that are being shown by these rugby league players is just absolutely incredibly bad performance management in this sport is rife for discrimination, sexual assault, drug abuse. And I just think that we need to have a really good look at what we're telling our young people and what role models are standing out there. And that whole thing of, you know, you can't be what you can't see is really true unless we're seeing like really strong leaders who have strong moral compasses and don't need their wife to tell them that they need to have a strong moral compass. You know, then we can't expect any different. I won't get started on it because I'll get really passionate about it.
I was actually thinking I'd forgotten about a more recent example where I felt quite anxious doing it, but I went to this future of, you know, global business. I won't say the large major telco, but there was a large major telco running it. And it was only about midday when they had a panel come on stage that I realised I hadn't seen any female speakers. And so being a speaker, I did have to kind of pull up the big girly undies to do it. But I went up to the guy that was running it and gave him my business card and had a conversation with him and said, well, if you don't have any female speakers, I'm quite happy to come and speak for you. But it was because I was horrified that this major telco was talking about the future and this and that. And from the conversation, I understood it was all the heads of the different departments, so that's why it was all these male speakers. But it also then said that they didn't have any female heads. So, you know, there was just so much tragedy upon tragedy. But interestingly, when I spoke to some of the young women that worked for that company there, they didn't see what the problem was. And that's where, again, it's very sad what's happening in Parliament and in rugby and in all of these different places. But I think it's also about educating the women and the youth of today that this behaviour isn't okay, that having a day-long conference that they were rolling out then around the rest of Australia, where all anybody saw again was male presenters, was not okay. And don't get started about the diversity and people in wheelchairs and this and that and whatever, because it didn't exist. And the women question about diversity has been something that's been around for a lot longer, but we still are having such a struggle just to get that across the line, and all of the rest of the diversity and the cultural and linguistically diverse, et cetera, et cetera. It shouldn't be this hard. Not in 2021. It definitely shouldn't be this hard.
No, and I don't think we're pushing it enough as women either. And again, I can only speak to being female, but I think that we're not pushing it enough, and we're not teaching our younger generations that should be pushing it enough, and they should be pushing that to be front of the agenda. It should come across the board.
So what do you think then, just to sum up that mindset then, because obviously we are privileged to be women and in Australia and all of those other wonderful things that I'm so incredibly grateful for. But what do you think is some of the things that have led you and supported you to have the confidence to be able to speak out about these types of issues?
Well, I don't know that I always think of myself as being confident to speak out against them. I think that I am incredibly lucky, and I'm a very optimistic person. I always have been, and that has obviously come from privilege. But I think that I try and think about what's the worst that can happen if I do say something. I might offend somebody, so what? But what's the worst that can happen if I don't say anything? And I have to be vocal. I think you need to walk the walk a little bit. My mindset comes from being, I consider myself a very resilient person, but that's only really come from the fact of what I had to deal with from my cancer diagnosis and everything like that. I had to be resilient, and I had to just sort of let control go to someone else to make me well again. But I think actually I did survive something that was pretty intense, and I'm really proud of my mind and body to overcome that. And that my resilience drives a lot of what I do. Again, because if I have to tell people bad news, I can't take that home every day. And for me, that finding that joy and that love and that happiness, you know, I'm one of these people, if you walk down the street with me, I will look at every single dog, no matter what the breed, what it looks like, and go, oh, that's the ugliest dog in the world. But I just find them so adorable. And it's the small things for me that I just find such joy. And I get a bit frustrated when people don't find joy in little things. But I really do. And it just keeps me sane, keeps me motivated, keeps me getting up every day and just loving what I do and what each day looks like for me.
Yeah, and I can't imagine. And I was just double checking there when I was looking away. If there were any comments, because people are able to ask questions, and we've been covering some quite topical topics today. But how brave, and you know, major illnesses do shift your perspective so much, and do you think that is a part of also what has created such a strong mindset for you around success? Because we're talking very much about that clarity about, you know, I want joy, everybody wants joy, but what does joy mean to me? And so do you think going through some quite difficult times has been what's helped you to understand, well, joy is sitting there and enjoying watching the bird eat the tree and things like that?
Yeah, like I think I don't consider myself to be brave, actually. I think I had to do what I had to do to be here. And it was, I look back at it now and think, oh God, I don't know that everyone could do that. But I think that it helped me probably not care so much about what people thought. And I care incredibly much what people think of me, because I want to be nice to people. And I probably am too nice a lot of the time. But I think that's natural for someone that does what I do. You have to show that care and attention to people. But I guess having that sort of wake up call that life's too short, and it really was it. You know, I had a 11% chance of surviving. And I think that I then look at it and go, I should make the most of it. There's plenty of people, and cancer communities will probably agree with this. If you're hearing this and you've been involved in a cancer community, you obviously lose people in those communities. So you do sit back and think, if I'm going to be here, I'm actually going to do some living and enjoy it, and yeah, see the little things for what they are. So that resilience and that joyfulness, I guess, comes from no longer really caring if I'm going to offend somebody.
And that nicely ties into the last question I have, and something that I'm really fascinated by. So what do you think it would, if you were talking to your younger self, and just, you know, I was lucky last week I was interviewed by a high school student who reached out, and I thought, wow, if I was, you know, 16 years of age and had reached out to a high profile person like myself and got the feedback at that age that I gave her. So what would you say to yourself if you were looking back to your younger self?
Yeah, I love this question. Obviously, from a health perspective, I'd tell her to look after herself a little bit more, but I would say not to be don't care so much about what people think. Don't be so caught up in it. And I always, you know, I love fashion and looking great, and I love having short hair and big earrings and all of that sort of thing. So I was always sort of putting myself out there for attention, but I cared quite deeply what people thought about me, and I was always worried about offending people. So I think now I'd probably say what's on your mind and do what you want to do, and don't care what people think. You know, stay empathetic and honest and kind, but don't let it dictate what decisions you make in your life.
Yeah, I find it funny that one of the things that most people, as they get older, that there's this common theme of, you know, not caring as much about what other people think, and it comes up time and time again as
particularly something.
Yeah. Well, we grow up with all of those societal expectations about roles and looks and all of those different things, and I'm a big sci-fi fan, so I don't particularly like the new series Discovery, but the different roles and different genders. You know, it's doing its part. Again, Star Trek's always done its part in terms of pushing the boundaries. They were the first TV show to have a black female actress on there and all sorts of different things. So now that they've got gender neutral and all sorts of other variations on characters on there, I think that those programs are great because they're kind of reflecting what's happening in society, but you don't necessarily already have those ideas about how it fits in with where you currently are. I'd like to just spend a few minutes, because we've got about 2 more minutes here, Nicole. Just what if you were talking to our audience and the people watching this show about mindset? You know, not everybody is going to have as dramatic stories as yourself. What would be the one thing that you would say to them, you know, about finding their passion in their career? What would be your final piece of advice for that?
Probably going back to what I would tell myself, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of it. Just embrace it and do it, communicate it, put it out there to the universe, manifest it, however you want to describe it, but just do it.
So do you ever feel like, though, you mentioned like becoming a fighter pilot before, do you think that there's something there that there's not a part of you that wishes that perhaps you had become a fighter pilot?
Maybe I should just buy myself a jumpsuit. I know you can buy them on Amazon, you know, those grey jumpsuits with the lapels, or I want to interview a fighter pilot. So if there's a fighter pilot listening, I'd love to have a chat. I'll buy you a coffee.
Well, you can get them at the shops, the rental shops for the fancy dress parties.
I'm going to get it for work on Monday.
It would be funny if you decided to rebrand yourself as the fighter pilot, you know, for recruitment. You know, I'm out there fighting for you and your career.
I love it. I love it. I might steal that. My daughter said you should just recruit fighter pilots. And I said, yeah, maybe. We'll see. Well, I think they know digital marketing.
Well, they would be. They're all engineers and very technical.
So true. Smart people.
But it's been such a pleasure having you on here today. And I'm sure that there's other people that would love to reach out, especially if they've got recruitment or headhunting or joy concerns or questions. So how would people actually contact you, Nicole?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I live on LinkedIn. I'm pretty much on there day in and day out. Nicole Harlow, not a hard name to remember. I say like Jean Harlow, but no one knows who Jean Harlow is anymore. So think of Jean Harlow, but yeah, Nicole Harlow. I work for a fantastic recruitment business called Big Wave Digital. I've joined them 2 weeks ago, and I'm loving, if Kieran, you're listening, I'm loving every minute of it. And, you know, we have a great time at work. So we recruit very heavily in the digital marketing space. So if you have some requirements to build great teams, that's what I do. And next to that, I coach people in what they want to do when they grow up. How do they find their joy and their love, and help them put those big picture plans into something that's more concrete and doable. And you can find me there. I've got my own website, nicoleharlow.com. That's easy to remember as well.
Fabulous. It's always easier. And you can see, I'll just point on the screen, you can see on the screen how you spell Nicole's name as well. So if you are looking for an absolutely fabulous recruiter in that digital tech space, or career advice, Nicole obviously has lived and breathed and gone through many iterations in her own life as the extra overseas, or the recruitment, or the real estate, and all of those different roles, and so knows full well how to move from having a career to doing something that you love and that you're passionate about. So it's been my absolute honour and joy to have you this week, Nicole. So thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Fabulous. So we have a few minutes left. So I'd just like to quickly talk about next week, as my guest is Kim Hewitt. So we move very much from that world of recruitment and what does success mean in terms of your career, and over to the world of health and fitness. Now, I've known Kim for a number of years, and he has an incredible story as well. And I'm so passionate and I'm so excited about sharing his story with everybody on the show. And my final piece of advice or commentary would be around joy. So I've loved today, and I've loved this conversation, Nicole, because it's all about joy, and it's all about finding the joy in your hearts. And so thank you once again, Nicole. And to everybody watching, looking forward to seeing you again next week at 12:30 on Tuesday. And until then, my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.